Well, hi there. My name is Alexis, and I would love to chat about five-star fantasy romance books. Before we get into the books, I want to quickly explain my rating system because it might be different than yours or someone else that you might watch here on BookTube. So, for me, a 5-star rating does not mean that the book is perfect, but it does mean that I had the perfect experience reading it. So, I base my ratings purely on experience and the experience that I have reading the book. So, just because I give something a 3-star or a 4-star doesn't mean it can't be a 5-star in your opinion, but for me, it's all about my own personal, very biased opinion and experience. All right, so now that that is clear, let's go ahead and chat about some books. Not sure why I'm shimmying, but we're gonna roll with it. Okay, so I had this notebook because my memory is a 1-star, and I wrote down all the books that I wanted to talk about. And I also have my phone just in case I need to do a quick summary because aforementioned 1-star brain can't always remember the book details. So bear with me and let's get into it. All right, so book number 1 on my list is Truthwitch. This is the first book in a series called The Witchlands by Susan Dennard, I believe. Susan Dennard, sorry. And to give a quick summary, Truthwitch is about this witch that has the gift of being able to tell truth from lies. And this is a very rare type of magic or witchery in this world that Susan Dennard has created. And because of that, she is a hot commodity. People want to steal her, people want to kill her, people want to manipulate her. So there's a lot of people that need or want this type of person, or they don't want the enemy to have them. So she's trying to keep her magic hidden. Meanwhile, she is best friends with a girl named Isolde. And Isolde also has a special type of magic, but it's hidden even from herself. And as the series continues, we get more of a glimpse into what kind of magic she has, but I don't want to spoil it just in case you do want to read the series and you want to figure that out on your own. But just know that her character development is just A+. I love how they took her character from seemingly like this background character. Not necessarily. She's not a background character. She's very much a main character, but she seems almost measly at first, kind of like the weaker of the two female characters. But then how she grows is just beautiful. So that's kind of the quick and dirty summary. Both of these girls have their own type of magic, and both are on the rare side, and they're both hot commodities in their own way. And it's risky for them both to go out in public and just share what kind of magic that they have. And so we go into this series of events that happens when they come into contact with a blood witch bodyguard who's seemingly ruthless and hunting them. And they also meet a character called Prince Merrick, and Safi and Prince Merrick kind of become allies. And again, I'm trying to not spoil anything, but Prince Merrick is also one of those pivotal characters. There is romance between Safi and Merrick, and potentially a romance later down the line for Isolde, but I don't want to spoil anything. So what I love about this series in particular is Susan Dennard did a great job at world building, character development, and including the fantasy elements and including the romance elements, but in a way to where it didn't just feel like a fantasy, it didn't just feel like a romance. It was this really well-built, multi-dimensional series, and it felt like an adventure. It was very fun to read this series, and I was just going from book to book, like, I need to know what happens next. I was on the edge of my seat. I really, really enjoyed seeing the different places that they got to travel to, and like just immersing myself in this world and their positions that they were in. I will say the romance side of things is not my favorite romance ever, but again, a 5-star rating doesn't mean that the book series is perfect. It means that my experience was just a top-notch experience. So based off of the action adventure and the funness of this series, I give it a 5-star. The second book that I want to chat about with you is Trickery. This is a part of the Curse of the Gods series by Jane Maneve and Jane Washington. There are 5 books in this series, and each book is actually quite on the shorter side. It's a very quick series to get through. Now, how do I explain to you how much I adore these books? Well, before I get into that, let me just quickly give a brief summarization. This series focuses on a girl named Willa Knight. She is a dweller. In this world, there are dwellers, souls, and gods. And the dwellers are kind of like servants, slaves, the lowly beings. They're just kind of plain humans, right? And then you have souls who are kind of a mix between humans and gods. They are still mortal, but they have some special magical abilities. And so the dwellers often serve the souls. And that is basically the greatest accomplishment a dweller can hope to do with their life, is to serve a soul. And then the souls sometimes die and become gods. But there are also gods who are original gods, who did not start off as souls, but were created by the creator god. So you've got dwellers, souls, and gods. You have that hierarchy throughout the book series. And Willa Knight is a dweller, and not only is she just this dweller who's at the bottom tier already, but she is even looked down upon by her fellow dwellers because she has what they call the clumsy curse. She is next level clumsy, which when you first start reading the first book, sometimes you might feel a little bit frustrated because you're like, how in the world can one person be so klutzy? How can they attract so many accidents to themselves? But it ends up becoming quite funny and endearing. Now, with the summary out of the way, I need to really emphasize how beautiful this writing was done and how fun and hilarious it was to read these books. I will say, if I had to be nitpicky, the world building and some of the plot details could have used some improvement, but because of how funny this perspective was from this main character, from Willa Knight, I can overlook the flaws because it was just perfection. I was laughing out loud through so many parts throughout this series. I would get side-eye glances from my husband, and he would be like, what are you laughing about? I'm like, these books are so good. I can't think of another book series that was quite as funny and quite as enjoyable to read because of that, because of how the sarcasm, the self-deprecation, her little pep talks to herself throughout the series. It stands by itself. I can't think of another series that's done in the same exact way or with a similar feel, because a lot of fantasy books, or books that are fantasy romance or historical fantasies, I feel like they can be quite serious, and sometimes they take themselves too seriously. And so I like that these authors were like, we are not going to take our world too seriously. We're going to have fun with this. And so that made it really great for me to read. A few other details is that this girl ends up kind of clumsifying her way into being a servant in one of the most prestigious soul academies. And she comes into contact with these 5 students at this academy and develops something. So I will say, I didn't know this when I went to read this, but I learned this afterwards. This book is also referred to as a reverse harem, I believe. So there are multiple love interests for one person, and normally that would drive me crazy, but it was very well done in the fact that it didn't feel like anyone was getting the blunt end of the stick. I felt like the way they explained it made sense. Now, I don't know if I would necessarily choose a book in that category again, just for the fact of having multiple love interests, but the way they did it, I don't really have too many complaints about. So 5 stars for Trickery. All right, so number 3 on my list is From Blood and Ash, from Jennifer Armentrout. Now, this is a part of her series called Blood and Ash, and currently there are 3 books in the series, And there's a fourth book that's going to be released in March of 2022. So I will be keeping an eye out for that one. But the first book from Blood and Ash focuses on a girl named Poppy. Poppy is the maiden, and she's a glorified prisoner. She has to live in isolation because she's the maiden. She has to wear a veil so no one can see her face. She's only allowed to talk to certain people. She can't really go out in public and do her own thing. She's not allowed to have friends except for her lady-in-waiting, essentially. So she's very, very much isolated, and the Duke and Duchess, who are taking care of her, are not very kind to her. So she's essentially living in a glorified prison, but she's told that it's for her own good because she's the maiden. She's the queen's favorite, the queen's chosen one. And she lives in a kingdom called Solace, I believe, which is funny because Solace is a lot like solitude. So I don't know if that was intentional from the author, but I see you. Anyway, so her Duke and Duchess and a few other people in the kingdom are the Ascended, and she's told that when she becomes 18, she gets to ascend. And typically you start off as a human in this world, a normal mortal, and then you go through the ascension. The few lucky people who get to go through the ascension just become nearly immortal. They have like more strength, and they're faster. So they don't really go into too much detail, I think, about what all surrounds becoming ascended, other than the fact that they become nearly immortal and have a little bit more power. And their eyes turn black after you ascend. You find out a little bit more as the series goes on, but that's what you find out from the beginning of the first book. And Poppy is just kind of like this very secluded girl in this kingdom that was the queen's favorite, and she is very nervous about this whole idea of ascension. She knows there's a lot of like questionable things regarding the ascension. When she goes to the history books, there's just some things that don't add up to her, and she just has a few questions, for her kingdom, and she's just not comfortable because she's getting closer and closer to her own ascension, and she's scared, and her gut isn't telling her that it's going to be a good thing. So we see that happen. Now our girl's a little bit of a rebel. She likes to sneak out whenever she can, because obviously if you're living in basically a prison, you're going to want to, I would go stir crazy. So she escapes her little prison sometimes, and she comes into contact with a guy named Hawk. Now, Hawk is a guard member, and a lot of people think he is just a really great guard. He's got a great reputation. A lot of the girls think he's super handsome, and him and Poppy have this exchange where she kisses Hawk, but she's wearing a mask and she doesn't know if he knows her identity. And this is like a forbidden thing. She's not even allowed to have friends, so let alone a boyfriend. But kind of fast forward through some things, Hawk ends up becoming one of her guards, her bodyguards, and they develop a little something, and it's just this whole forbidden thing that happens. And there are so many details that I wish I could tell you, but they would all be spoilers. So I love how this series kind of takes this, what you would think would be the stereotypical secluded girl, and just really makes you see past stereotypes and preconceived notions. And I think a lot of things that they drive home throughout all of the books in this series, including the first one, is that what you see is not what you always get. And that there's so many things beyond what you see that are happening, so many invisible forces that are at play. And you might think that you know a person, and you don't. And sometimes that's a really cool thing, and you get to see this whole other side and this whole other beauty, this whole other strength to a person. And other times it might not be a great thing, so you think you know someone and they end up betraying you. So I really, really love this whole concept of not judging a book by its cover. pun intended, and seeing this character development that happens. And I like that she doesn't view herself as this perfect person. She doesn't have this like high and mighty perspective of her own self, and she doesn't view herself as someone on a pedestal. She's very realistic about how she looks at herself, and that's really refreshing to know and to see in this character, because I think a lot of the books that you read in in fantasy romances have this strong female character that's very like, I'm strong, I am sneaky, I'm smart, and they're like very, I don't know what the word is. They're very assured of themselves, which isn't always a bad thing, but it's just nice to have something that's different. So this is a breath of fresh air because it's a different type of personality. And the world itself is pretty well done. I think that the scary elements are there, and I didn't even touch on that. So the scary part of it is the fact that you've got these things called the Kraven, and they're essentially this vampire zombie mix, which is as bad and scary as it sounds. I'm not a fan of zombies. I don't do zombies. But these Kraven were once humans, and now they're these basically monsters, and like they're kind of decaying, and they're so bloodthirsty that that's all that they can focus on, and they like to eat people. And if you get bitten by a Kraven but you don't die, you turn into a Kraven. So it's just like, yay, I survived a Kraven attack, but I got bitten, so now I'm going to turn into a Kraven. So it's like, you really don't want to survive a Kraven attack unless you can find out a way to survive without turning into one. So yeah, it's scary, that whole thing. Don't love that, but you have to have a little scary element to, like, get you going. So there's so many more aspects to it. Like, Atlantia is the other kingdom, the enemy kingdom, and you've got Atlanteans who are their own version of immortal that are different from the Ascended. So that's all I can really share without going into spoilers, but this is such a good book. And like I said, I love the character development in this, and I love this whole narration of, you gotta look past what you see at face value. So 5 stars. Okay, so number 4 on my list is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I know. This is such an overhyped book all across the internet. There are so many people who are fans of this book series, and I can't blame them. I'm here for this book series. It's a 5-star book series for me. Now, I will say, my reason for giving it 5 stars is potentially different than some other people's reasoning for giving it 5 stars. I know a lot of people love the romance of these books, and I'm saying I like it. I think it's a strong aspect of this book series, but it is not the reason I'm giving this book series 5 stars. I think this book series deserves 5 stars because of the world, the magic, how they explain it, the character development, the romance, and an interesting thing that I think she incorporates is the mental health journey. I really like how she interweaves the mental health of her main characters throughout all of her series, but especially this one. Feyre definitely, she makes choices sometimes based off of her mental health that I just find really realistic. Even though it's a fantasy world, I could really relate to some of the things that she was thinking and doing, and she does a great job at writing about depression and how it affects you physically, and how sometimes when you're not in the right mind, you can't even trust yourself to treat those around you very well or to make the right decisions. How you can be easily manipulated when you don't have a great view of your own self. So I just really love how big a role mental health plays in A Court of Thorns and Roses. Now, if you don't know this book, if you've never heard of it before, which I find it hard to believe, but if you've never heard of this book before, it focuses on Feyre, who is this girl from this human village. Her and her family were once rich, but they've become poor, and her dad has a disability because physically he has a hard time walking. He's got a pretty severe limp, and so he can't kind of bring in a whole lot of money for his family. And her two older sisters, they don't really do anything to bring money in, so she is just working her butt off to get food on the table. She goes out and hunts, and during one of her little hunting adventures, she kills this wolf. That's not a wolf. It's actually a fae. And the fae, in this world, you have your human kingdoms separated by the fae kingdoms, by this line. Now, this line, I think it's actually invisible. It's not like a wall that you see, but it's by magic. And the fae aren't supposed to cross into the human world, and vice versa. The humans aren't supposed to cross into the fae world. And the humans don't really even want to, because the fae used to hold humans in slavery. They used to be slaves. So there's this lot of animosity towards the fae from the human perspective. And the fae just look at humans like they're worthless, essentially. Just like, we don't care about you, or we hate you, type of thing. So Feyre kills this wolf that's fae. And another fae comes to her family home and was like, you broke the treaty between human and fae by doing this. You can either die right now, right here, right now, or I can steal you and take you away. And she's like, I don't know. And her dad's like, take her, get her out of here. I don't want her. I know he didn't say I don't want her. He's saying, like, you deserve better than this world. You need to go. And she's just like, really, Dad? You're like, you don't want to keep me? You're not even gonna fight for me? But anyway, she ends up going into the fae world, and you kind of have this Beauty and the Beast spin-off type of plot happening. But I say that very loosely because there's not really, like, there's some elements of the Beauty and the Beast that can be found, but it's a loose connection between the two. And I like that. I like that there's, like, some familiarity, because you're like, you think you know where it's going, but then the series just takes a turn in the best way possible, and it totally steers off of the Beauty and the Beast plot line after that. And it's just so, I feel like everything even after the first book just gets better and better, and I love it. There are 3 books in the series. There was a 4th one that was released that's technically still a part of the series, but it switches to her sister's perspective. So there are 3 books in the series that are from Feyre's perspective, and I so good. Like I said, the mental health part and all the things. The romance obviously is so good in it. Yeah, A Court of Thorns and Roses, 5 stars. And the 5th and final book on my list today is Throne of Glass. This is a part of another series by Sarah J. Maas. And again, you've probably heard it before. A lot of people go on and on about this series, and a lot of people rave about the romance. I, again, don't love this book for the romance. I like this book because of how empowering it felt to read it. My experience reading this, I just felt really inspired to not just be this, like, meek and quiet and gentle female, but to really, like, stand up for myself. And it makes me, like, want to learn how to work out so I can get muscles to be strong. I feel like that's a weird thing to say about a book, but it does. It makes me wish I could, like, knew how to fight, and it makes me wish I was this warrior person. And I feel like this was one of the first books that I read, because I read this several years ago, and it was one of the first books that I read where I saw this image of a female character who's like this warrior who's unapologetic for her strength and what she's done to survive. And I probably even shouldn't say unapologetic. I mean, she is, to a sense, to a degree, she's unapologetic. But you do also see the things that she regrets and the things that she's done that she wishes she did differently. But you understand why she made those choices as the series continues. So, again, Sarah J. Maas did this great job of, like, making this just different female perspective. I could be wrong, but I feel like Sarah J. Maas really pioneered this whole, like, strong warrior female persona that a lot of historical fiction, fantasy, romance books have been incorporating. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect. I felt really inspired by the main character. To give you a quick summary, in case you don't know, you have Selena, and she's this assassin, and she's got a lot of secrets, but the king in her world is basically holding this competition between a bunch of other assassin warrior type people, and it's basically just like a fight to the death to become the king's chosen of this competition. And that's kind of how the first book starts off, but the series dives a whole lot further. I forgot how many books are in the series. I want to say there's like 7 books in the series. If I'm wrong, I'll put the right number on the screen, but a lot of books. So it's not for the faint of heart to get involved in the series, but it is so worth it because of the character development that happens. Because she starts off seemingly unapologetic and a strong, empowered girl, and then she's still strong and empowered. She starts seeing herself in a more healthy light. She is able to own up for her shortcomings, and she's able to let some walls down as the series develops. So it's really, really well done. I love the adventure aspect, the war, the battles, the magic development that happens. It's really great. Something that kind of disappoints me sometimes is that a lot of the Sarah J. Maas books have this reputation of being smut, and that all she's good for is romance or smut. And I just really, truly, wholeheartedly disagree with that. I think that there's definitely some steamy scenes in her books, but I don't think that those are the only things her books revolve around. I think she does a really great job at world building, and she does a really great job of explaining the magic and explaining the politics. I think if it was just about the politics and just about the fantasy world building, I don't know if I would like the books as much. Not because they're not strong, but because the romance just brings some hope to the seriousness. You've got a lot of stressful things happening, and to have that romance really balances it well, I think, and it brings like something worth fighting for type of thing. So I can see why she included that, and I think it really does a great job at balancing the stress level of all the things that are happening. So to have that stress release with the romance scenes or the romance connections, I think it's really beautifully done. So I am not here for this whole Sarah J. Maas smutty reputation, and I wanted to clear the air about that. Alright, that is it for my 5-star fantasy romance books. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you've read one of these books, I would love to hear your opinion of what you thought. Leave it in the comments below. If you have read a 5-star fantasy book that I didn't list, leave it in the comments below, because I am currently on the hunt for a book in this genre. The last few books that I've read in the fantasy romance category have been disappointing. They've not been great. So I'd love to hear one that was a winner for you. And that's it. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.